Hello, our favorite human. Welcome back to Bronx Tales with your host, Bronxy B, and me, I'm Logan. Thank you for being here. Everybody has been playing the interview with Bethany, and I'm pretty sure it should be labeled Blaker's first interview with a toddler rubber ducky because that is ridiculous.
What you heard, what you saw, and any timeline, any information that you can give us so that we can try and figure out what happened, okay? So just take a deep breath for me. I know this isn't going to be easy. We'll kind of go from there, okay?
That is the most ridiculous interview I've ever seen. He literally treats her like a gosh darn baby. And I firmly believe had a woman done the interview or somebody with some type of experience, it would have gone completely different. I counted 9 times that Bethany's answer was, I don't know. And 9 times that was an acceptable answer to Blaker.
I don't know how to explain it. And I don't know if they're ever remain.
I don't know. She should have been nailed down to a very specific timeline. Every second matters. He didn't ask her any questions regarding when you got home, did you leave the lights on? When you went to bed, did you leave the lights on? Did you take your shoes off? Were there any windows open? Do you know if Maddie left the door open? Do you know this? Do you know that? Did anything happen? Did this? Did that? Any type of detail should have been asked. When she came home, did she take off her shoes? Did she know if the other girls had her shoes on? What was talked about in Kaylee's room? How long were you in Kaylee's room? When you went to bed, when you grabbed your bag of chips and you went to bed, did you turn all the lights off? Were all the lights off downstairs? When you went to bed, what lights were left on upstairs? When you got home, did you change your clothes? What did you wear that night? What did you change your clothes into? Asking some of those questions, especially fast, will sometimes knock a person clear out of their story and answer in things that are maybe dishonest and can give a possible lead as to what actually happened. And that was never done. Bethany was taken at her word, and her word was sometimes magically turning on the switch of the tears and then magically turning it off very quickly. And there were several times her answer was, I don't know, I was half asleep. Well, an hour later, 2 hours later, 3 hours later, you've been on your phone. You have had this conversation with Dylan when she came in. You made several phone calls. You were not half asleep that entire time. I will give you maybe a minute or two when you first woke up. Other than that, you can't be considered half asleep, and that doesn't work for me. That's not an excuse. This interview was not okay. On top of that, I don't even know why she's being blurred out. She is an adult. She's agreeing to this interview. This doesn't make any sense. They literally treated her like a toddler. And that's exactly why from minute one, this investigation was completely inept, and these officers have no business being officers. They have no idea what they are doing. When Bethany was asked regarding any phone calls or conversations she had, she still lied about her being the first one to call Dylan. She stated that Dylan called her first. No, that is not true, and we know that from the text messages and phone call log of both of them. Bethany called Dylan first. Why did Bethany call Dylan first, and why is she lying about that? In 2 interviews now, she has lied about that, and I would like to know why. Bethany claims she went to sleep about 3-ish. She stayed up for about a half an hour, and at that time, as far as we know, Xana and Ethan still weren't home yet. To me, that raises the question, was Ethan and Xana followed home by the perpetrators, or were the perpetrators already lying in wait in a closet or behind a door or whatever for certain victims to arrive home? That means they would have to have knowledge of who's living in the house, whose room is whose, and who gets home and when. Now, I don't know if the perpetrators were already there or if they came in through the third floor. Things that Dylan says makes us believe that the perpetrators were possibly already there or at least came in through the third floor, because she states Kaylee was in the living room with her dog up until she ran up the stairs and screamed that somebody was there, meaning that person would have had to walk by them to get in the house if they came in through the back slider, and that didn't happen. So Dylan makes several statements about maybe being in a tree, which I found interesting from Stephen Christie's recent interview with Nancy Grace. But if they were already there, lying in wait, and had been there the entire night, that means that they know who these victims are. They know when they get home, they know whose room is whose, and they have a lot of knowledge on the house and the people in it, just like law enforcement stated from the beginning. And just like law enforcement stated, Bryan Kohberger didn't have any knowledge on the house or the victims, any connection, any intel, nothing, nada. I think it's very clear when reading over the reports that the officers made that was to report on the interviews that they conducted. It's very, very clear that these officers inserted whatever words they felt like inserting. Never was the word clad in black used, ever. Bushy eyebrows was not used by the roommates, ever. Insinuating what type of mask it was to Dylan and completely leading Bethany in questioning her was absurd. That should never happen. Leading an interview for a survivor, a victim, or a perpetrator should never happen. And that's pretty much all this was. And the reports reflect that as well. And speaking of the reports, Lana over at Truth and Transparency, whose channel will be linked in the description box below, had a huge find last night, and I will cut it down for you and just give you the main boom of what she found, which is incredible. Everybody should know this information, and that's why I want to make sure and get it out there and that nobody missed it. And that was, officers stated, Bryan Kohberger's phone was not searched prior to having a warrant to search his phone. However, the officer wrote down the IMEI number of Bryan Kohberger's phone to get the warrant. How would he know that information if the phone had never been accessed? If they, FBI, never got into Bryan Kohberger's phone, this officer would not have an IMEI number to write on the report to get the warrant. Meaning they absolutely searched in Bryan Kohberger's phone prior to having a warrant, which means all of that information would have never been able to be evidence in court, and Hippler should have known that. Hippler is just as guilty in this complete injustice as the perpetrators are, because Hippler is letting all of this crap happen.
Bryan Kohberger's cell phone. I want to talk to you
The
about
physical cell phone or the data from the cell phone?
We're going to talk about both of those.
Okay.
So for purposes of today's argument, we've called it cell phone / USB. How did the state come into possession of Bryan's phone?
Obtained via the warrant in Pennsylvania.
Was a copy of that phone made prior to the search warrant being signed?
Pennsylvania one?
Right.
I do not know.
Was the extraction searched before the warrant was obtained in Idaho?
No.
He just said no. How the fuck do you know that? You're not in Pennsylvania. Where was the extraction done? Listen to this. This is absolutely, now it's all making like, oh my God.
And how do you know that?
I was the one that received the extraction.
Dude, he like literally answered that with the straight face. Like, these motherfuckers are dumb. They're dumb. Dude, well, no, nobody searched it. Wait, how do you know that? Well, because I was the one that received the extraction. Where was the extraction done? In Pennsylvania. The FBI did the extraction. How do you have to perform an extraction? And that's where I think Mathis is needed to like literally hand feed and spoon feed it to these judges to break it down like second graders. Okay, an extraction. Don't you physically need the phone And then what do you have to do? How does one extract the data? And then how would you know? So then the data gets put onto a USB or like a bigger storage box. And then how do you know if somebody actually plugged it into their laptop and actually went through the extraction? Now, this is what we're getting into with the leaking of Bryan Kohberger's cell phone. So how would you know that nobody searched the extraction if the extraction was done in Pennsylvania and you are in Idaho? How would you know that? And on 6/2/2025, 6/2, 2 months before trial, the defense is asking one more time, can the state please give me a copy of the chain of custody of Bryan Kohberger's cell phone? Okay. And what he just said there, he was not in Pennsylvania. Okay. And what he just said there and what's on here is not the same. How do you write a warrant if you are in Idaho on January 3rd or 4th and writing down what the IMEI numbers are? How would you know that? There's only one way. That would mean that the people, aka the FBI, when they had the phone in Pennsylvania, they were in the phone. No other way for you to possibly know that.
Can you turn to page 24?
This is so good. This is so sick.
You see that page?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that a page entitled Search Warrant?
Yes, ma'am.
Looking at the first paragraph of that search warrant, is there any reference to search warrant affidavit in the warrant?
No, ma'am.
And is the date of the crime on the search warrant?
No, ma'am.
January 3rd, 2023, that warrant asked for Bryan Christopher 1994 at Gmail, 2 phone numbers, and an IMEI number. What's an IMEI?
International Mobile Equipment Identifier.
And how did you get that number to put in the January 3rd, 2023 Google warrant?
I do not recall.
Oh, oh my God. Hitler has 1000% allowed this to be a complete circus and a complete injustice. There is absolutely no reason that he should have not caught on to what the defense was trying to tell him in this examination of this officer. I also want to take a look at Pav's recent video, as I had some points to make prior to him even making this video, but since he so kindly made this video that we can use, I'm going to use a little bit of it to explain some of my points as well. Pav's channel will be linked below. I'm sure you guys are already following him. If you're not, his channel is in the description below.
Because in this document, it is going to explicitly cover evidence that we never knew existed. Evidence that we never knew existed. How about DNA under all the victims' fingernails? How about blood DNA evidence that was not the victims on handrails and walls? And how about blood DNA on the back of the knife sheath that apparently they can't find the contributors to any of these things? And none of them are Bryan Kohberger, just his little touch DNA on the front of the knife sheath on the button snap. But apparently they had, gallons of blood everywhere all over this house, underneath the victim's fingernails and everywhere else, that they used to exclude people in this case that they didn't feel the need to send off to do genetic genealogy on. Now, how easy would it have been to do genetic genealogy on blood? And they had apparently a lot of it, and it was for people that they didn't know, according to them. I happen to believe that it's probably blood from somebody that they did know. But what I'm about to show you is just going to be astounding, y'all. June 6, 2025. Originally was sealed. State's objection to defendant's offer of proof re alternate perpetrators and defendant's evidence in support of offer of proof alternate perpetrators. The defendant next points to 3 lab reports which merely reflect that as part of Jack Showalter's cooperation with investigators, he voluntarily submitted a DNA sample and fingerprints. Tellingly, the defendant fails to note that the ISP forensic lab eliminated Jack Showalter's DNA from the crime scene. But how did they do that? Watch this. Showalter's DNA was not found on the knife sheath strap. And then you'll see in parentheses on which DNA was found that was matched to the defendant. It's important to note that they put in parentheses about Kohberger's DNA being found on the knife sheath strap, because they will never make this statement in any of this again as we go through this. So the only evidence they ever had against Kohberger was touch DNA found on the strap of the button snap of the knife sheath. But look at this. Or in the DNA mixture found on the back of the sheath. So if they're excluding Jack Showalter from a DNA mixture found on the back of the sheath, then that means that mixture included, other than the victims, somebody that was unknown. And that unknown of the DNA mixture on the back of the knife sheath was used to exclude Jack Showalter. So I believe what the defense was trying to show everybody was the evidence in this case. There was a DNA mixture on the back of the knife sheath, and it wasn't Kohberger's.
Pav mentioned in his video how many different DNA sources that were on not only the wall, the railing, the floor, but also the knife sheath is a huge one. There was unknown mixtures of DNA on that knife sheath. There is unknown DNA under the victim's fingernails, all of the victim's fingernails, the handrail, the short wall, and that was never looked into. And I would surmise that the person who did this, or the people who did this, were absolutely injured, as red fluid is extremely slippery, and there is no way a person could give that many wounds and engaging in an actual fight with at least two of them. I'm sure they got injured from their own weapon in these altercations. It would be astronomical if they didn't. And you guys know that the red fluid droplets in both Maddie's room and Xana's room next to the doorway has always been something that's bothered me. And I've spent a ton of time digging into that and trying to find answers because it bothers me. And usually when something like that bothers me, there's a reason why. And I can't give up until I figure it out. And I believe I have now figured it out. I believe these droplets are coming from a wound from a perpetrator. This is dripping from the perpetrator, either hand or arm or anything. That is where these droplets came from. And the reason I believe that is because I also believe that this red fluid left behind on Maddie's door, I believe, was from the perpetrator's hand closing her door, which is also why Murphy never went into the room and never tracked red fluid anywhere, because I believe the perpetrator closed Maddie's door as he left, as he walked out. As he or she walked out of the room, they closed Maddie's door, and that is why Murphy never tracked red fluid from her room anywhere else. And it also tells me where I believe the red fluid footprint in front of Dylan's door came from. I firmly believe that Hunter spent more time inside the house than what would have been allotted and the time frame to just check on Xana and her pulse and then exit. I firmly believe now that Hunter went upstairs and he opened Maddie's door and looked and saw both Maddie and Kaylee, and he knew, which means the others knew. Now, it also could have been a roommate. Either way, they knew because they opened Maddie's door, and when they walked away, they left Maddie's door open. It was not open the entire time. I firmly believe that. Now, also, I believe that that footprint in front of Dylan's door is from Hunter's Vans flip-flop. From checking on Xana and getting her pulse, he then tracked red fluid. Whether he cleaned it up or not, I don't know. We don't know. But I believe that footprint in front of Dylan's door came from Hunter Johnson's white van flip-flop after checking on Xana. That would be her red fluid as he was going up the stairs to open Maddie's door and see if anything had happened to them. That's where that came from. That is why Murphy doesn't have red fluid on him. And I firmly believe that. So today has been one boom after another boom after another boom. And you wrap all of this up together and all of the DNA in the house that is not Bryan Kohberger's and that they don't have a person to match whose DNA is left behind. And it's several different DNA mixtures that tells you it was several perpetrators and none of them were Bryan Kohberger. I have no clue how Bryan Kohberger will not eventually be exonerated. He will absolutely eventually be exonerated. This is astounding. This is incredible information that we all have, and all of it ties together, and it shows that there was more than one perpetrator and none of them were Bryan Kohberger, and that is very clear. That's what we have on the case for you today. I have a couple more videos coming for you. I do want to thank everybody for all the prayers for my grandma as she suffered a massive stroke. She was paralyzed on her left side completely, but also her eyelids were paralyzed. So she was not able to open her eyes. You guys prayed and helped, and we've done a lot over here too. And today she was able to open her eyes by herself. And I just want to thank everybody. My grandma's been in my life my entire life, and she means a lot to me. So I just want to thank everybody for thinking of her and saying prayers as we hope that she can pull through this. Bronx's surgery is coming up on Tuesday, so I'm worried about that as well. I hope you guys can continue to give us a couple of prayers as they worked in my grandma's case. So I very much appreciate it. Other than that, do something nice for yourself today.